Scientists in China are trying to determine if a new virus strain is responsible for a pneumonia outbreak in the
screening passengers for symptoms of a deadly new virus.
You must stay at home.
With many of them on the brink of closure.
To create a new vaccine.
Where is the world headed after COVID? Where are we headed politically and economically? What are the consequences of the pandemic? And what are the connections between all of these policies that we're seeing implemented in Spain, in other European countries, in the US, and around the world? And to answer that question, let me go back and address this in 3 quick points. The first is a long-term economic trend that we have seen in most advanced economies over the past 20 to 30 years. And that trend is the erosion of our middle classes as a product of very rapid technological deployment and its impact on our labor market and its effects on income generation and distribution, which has very clearly led, and now we have abundant data on this, to a hollowing out of the middle of our income distribution.
This is the challenge for today, to meet competition and rising costs by moving step by step towards automation.
The other side of that coin has been an increase in inequality in most advanced economies, and the political consequence of this process has been the hollowing out of the center of our political spectrum. And as COVID hit, this was the backdrop to the response to the pandemic, a very deep concern in capitals around the world, but not just capitals, in multilateral institutions, in the IMF, in the World Bank, in the EU, in the Commission and others, that the COVID crisis would deepen social fracture and hence lead to further political fracture. It would affect single-parent households, it would displace precarious jobs, short-term jobs, low-pay jobs. So that's the long-term trend. The medium-term trend, which is perhaps less evident, is a slow but certain shift in the scope of monetary policy and of the role of central banks. So starting in 2007, 2008 with the financial crisis, we started seeing very new monetary tools being deployed and a very expansive monetary policy being used to counter the effects of the then financial crisis, real estate crisis, and in the case of Europe, sovereign debt crisis for a number of countries. During the COVID pandemic, we've seen this policy increase. We've seen monetary expansion be either kept in place or expanded in many instances. And this has also led to a very expansionary fiscal policy in most countries. The calculations about the sustainability of public debt have changed very, very radically. Despite the stock of debt to GDP rising over the past few years, the cost of servicing that debt has gone down. So most of our countries are more indebted as a percentage of their GDP today, but they're spending much, much less of their current and recurrent budgets on servicing that debt. You could see that you could almost finance an expansion in public debt at a very low cost, if not even negative cost, because some of our countries are issuing debt are negative interest rates. So Spain passed stimulus packages that were upwards of 20% of GDP at the peak of the crisis. The European Union has approved the Next Generation funds, the SURE funds and others, that almost doubled the fiscal resources of the EU. So if you look at the Next Gen funds, in total it's about 750 billion euros, which is almost the same size as the multi-year financial framework of the EU.
President Biden set to sign the first half of his signature infrastructure bill into law.
These bills are about competitiveness. They're about opportunity. They're about leading the world or continue to let the world pass us by, which is literally happening.
The Biden administration with the infrastructure plan, it is a historic response in terms of the scale of the fiscal stimulus being pumped into the economy. It is 5 or 6 times the scale of what we did in 08 and 07 during the financial crisis. Another very important feature is that most of these plans are targeted at the middle class. They are targeted at sustaining employment. They are targeted at sustaining our productive tissue through soft loans and public guarantees of loans for our businesses so that liquidity problems would not become solvency problems and these firms would not go bankrupt. We have a historic opportunity in our hands to reverse the long-term trend of erosion of our middle class and social fracture, to move to an economy that is more productive, more digital, more competitive, and more sustainable, and a greener economy. And this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. This is going to change global economics. It's going to change domestic economics in Spain, in Germany, in France, in the US, and in advanced economies. And it's going to change the distribution of growth and the direction and destination of economic growth for years to come.